now. I'm going to record in the cloud. All right, it's recording.
Paul Cottrell, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right.
You're just telling me about your censoring?
Yeah. So what just happened yesterday is Tradcat Night. So I call it TCK, but Eric, he has a pretty decent sized channel. And, we've been talking about the whole vaccine issue and stuff. So he does these web conferences and he charges like $10 a ticket. And he tries to get about 100 people in or whatever. And he has guest speakers. I spoke at one of his web conferences, but I was promoting, just to help him out, I was promoting his video, his promotional video on my channel yesterday. Well, YouTube just took it down, put a strike on my channel, and now I can't go live or publish on the main channel, but I can publish on the backup channel. And obviously I have, publishing capability on Brighteon. So I'm publishing everything for the next 7 days on Brighteon and the backup channel, which is Dr. Paul Cottrell. Both of them are called Dr. Paul Cottrell. But my main channel, Paul Cottrell, that's like shut down for 7 days because I put a promotional video that had Judy Mikovits talking about, with other individuals at the web conference, talking about their perspective on how vaccines are not safe. So I get this strike saying that it's literally going against what the CDC is saying. So wait a minute. So the arbiter, the one that is going to make sure that the info police, it's not just information war. The info police is YouTube, and they're going to decide what is prim and proper to publish. I mean, it's insane. We got to do something about this. I mean, it's just like the censorship is out of control, and a lot of people that watch my channel, they're getting unclicked. They're being unsubscribed, and their notifications aren't happening. So the way I get around that is that they have to follow me on Twitter or YouTube to get the notification. But I mean, so what's been going on? I talked to George on Sunday, and he was saying that you've been sitting in some hearings and, listening to the politicians talk or whatever. And, so maybe you can, tell my listeners what you've been up to.
Yeah, I didn't get in one day, but then I got to kind of stand, I guess, outside more or less. And then I went down a couple other days to the Capitol as well, just covering the electoral ballot casting on Monday. And then before that, there was a hearing for election fraud as well for the election subcommittee on fraud here in Georgia, which was supposed to convene the week before on Thursday. And one of my sources here was actually supposed to appear. She never did. They ended up moving the meeting back. They pushed the meeting back, and several people didn't show up, and she didn't even get to appear. Likewise with many other fraud witnesses, and they also moved witnesses around. I think there's this number 2 guy that had a lot to say, and they just moved him down to the bottom of the list. They didn't even let him appear either. But yeah, it's not looking great here, Paul, as far as the presidential election goes. It's something that I'm focusing more on the Senate right now, the Senate race, because that's still up for grabs. The January 5th runoff election here in Georgia. And then other stories I've been covering is the Kelly Loeffler aide, Harrison Deal, who is also the boyfriend of the daughter of Kemp, Governor Kemp as well, died Friday before last in a car accident. And my story on that actually got a lot of traction. It's at like 28K now, which is probably the biggest.
Give me a little brief on this whole Kemp thing. What happened?
So he called for a signature audit. I think it was that same week. Finally, he called for an audit after people kind of hounding him on it. And then a few days later, on Friday, his daughter's boyfriend was killed in a car crash. and this car crash was quite something, Paul. I can link it to you. It's I did like a 2.5 minute piece on it, but it started blowing up right away, and it looks like a drone strike. Like both cars were
Well,
just charred.
if you send me some pictures, because I was an automotive engineer and I designed body structure, I could tell you right away what kind of accident it was. We were
Sure.
trained to be able to do that because we had to smash cars against walls and analyze the data.
Yeah,
I'm trained to analyze forensically a car crash.
yeah, I'll send it to you, Paul, and I'll link it to for anybody that wants to see it. I mean, both cars were black, charred, smoking, after being just completely engulfed in flames. Multiple witnesses.
Where was the hit? Where's the car?
Pooler Parkway, which is
No. On the actual car. Was it a front end collision? Was it a side end collision?
it looks like an explosion, man. It doesn't look like a car accident to me. It maybe it was a rear ending just because one car was right in front of the other. I don't know if that's what they're going with, but multiple people said they heard explosions, more than one explosion.
To explode a car
in the area.
To explode a car with a rear end collision would have to be like 150 miles an hour.
Even if it was a Tesla, what if one of them was a Tesla? Would that affect it if it's an electric vehicle? I heard some people discuss that, like you could hack a Tesla and make it explode or something. I don't know if that's a feasibility.
I mean, what's going to explode in the Tesla? There's nothing combustible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all electrical. It'll catch fire, but it won't explode. Mm-hmm. I mean, a combustible engine will explode. I mean, literally, what is a combustible engine? A controlled explosion. Each one of every time that piston is pushed down by exploding, vaporized gas, that's a controlled explosion. And that's happening multiple times a second. So it's, so that's what a combustible engine is. So when a car is going to explode, it's usually a gas leak line. Now, what is interesting is I thought this weekend, and you probably know about this weekend, I thought the hard drive repair guy for Hunter Biden's laptop, he got killed.
The blind guy? No way.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And it was this weekend.
What happened? Or what's the story? The narrative?
Well, I just saw it on Twitter, so it's only 146 characters, but he's dead.
Yeah.
So this sounds like, if you remember, going back to, maybe you don't remember this, going back to when Carrie.
We're recording, right, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember one time we had a fluke there, just making sure.
No. Yeah, no, we're recording.
Okay,
it's recording into the cloud. If you remember right, during Bush and Kerry, so the second election for Bush Jr. Yeah. Remember there was some records for Kerry that someone had that were dealing with the boat incident in Vietnam, and that this person's house was broken into and the records were taken. It reminds me of this type of situation is that there were a group of people that when someone is running for president or is president or elected president, that there's like a cleanup crew that comes in that tries to clean up stuff so that any evidence that could go against them is whitewashed. And I think that there was a hit out on this repair guy. Now, what's stupid is my understanding is that there were 4 drives that were copied, and that Steve Bannon has one of the drives. Mm-hmm. So even killing the guy doesn't do anything because the guy
sends a message.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, it does send a message, but I mean, it's very reminiscent of this kind of like Hillary Clinton kind of thing. There's like a Hillary Clinton Arkansas kind of thing
body
going on
count.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Arkansas did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just watched this great documentary on Aaron Swartz actually, I think it was last week. One of the founders of the RSS feed, Creative Commons, Reddit, Wikipedia. This guy was just a prodigy. He's a genius. And he was downloading from the JSTOR system using a guest account on MIT because he believes strongly in the freedom of scientific information.
Mhm.
Not to mention, like the Pacer website was mentioned as well, where public documents have to be paid for, pennies, but it amounts to like $150 million at that time was the amount for public documents that should be free to the public. And the FBI investigated him, and he ended up killing himself.
Mhm.
I don't know if he killed himself or not.
There's a good documentary on YouTube about this.
Yeah, while he was awaiting trial, he died, and I remember hearing about him. He died my senior year of high school, but even before that, my parents mentioned him at a dinner table talk. I think when I was in middle school, and they're just saying that he's been targeted or something to that effect. But just going back and learning about a guy like that who was so kind of principled in a way, especially when it came to freedom of information on the internet, I think was really great. But yeah, like also, it ties into the anonymous hackers as well too, and how anonymous kind of transformed from this group on the internet that was really into like memes and stuff to a hacker arm of the group that goes against all these government entities as well.
Well, I think that it would be nice to see an alignment between these, I'll call them professional hackers, and citizen journalists. If we could align, then you really have a citizen CIA that we were talking about when you, George, and I were doing a show together.
Yeah, public intelligence, open source.
Yeah. Because this is, we need more capability of being able to get behind the screen, and figure out what's going on. I mean, look at what just happened just recently in Florida with that data scientist, and the police came into her apartment, with guns drawn, and saying that she's stealing information and all this proprietary information. Who knows? I mean, but the thing is that she definitely was telling the audience that, hey, they're not publishing the right amount of information that they should be publishing. And it so happens to be some of that is hospitalizations. But
well, they were also, messing with the numbers too. If I read that correctly, she's saying they weren't releasing all the data, and I think actually changing data too. And then they came and seized all her computers and stuff like that. It's
well, here's the thing is that not only you had insiders, or let's not call her insider. Let's just say you had workers, you had individuals, professionals that were compiling the data and analyzing the data and presenting it in a graphical format. And that was that was what they did for the state. That's how they were employed. Coming out and stating that there were improprieties that were going on. Now we need to have access to people like her to get the word out of what her story is, because there is a mosaic. It's not just her incident. It's not just the incident with the car crash. It's not just the incident with the hard drive guy getting killed. There's a mosaic that they're interconnected, and they're one layer of it is to scare you. Another layer is there's a misinformation, a disinformation that's taking place with the Smith modernization. So you have Johns Hopkins telling you stuff that's not really true, partially true. Then you have mainstream media that is reading off a teleprompter is being okayed by higher ups.
No evidence of Hunter Biden's misdoings.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
I mean,
evidence.
yeah. Well, they're saying the same thing. There's no evidence of voter irregularities or voter fraud. And that's totally untrue. That's totally untrue.
It's a gaslighting attempt. People have to look at the documentation.
I've never really understood the term gaslight. When someone says gaslight, I mean, I just never, and it could be generational, why it never clicked for me.
Oh, you mean what's the origin of the word itself?
I mean, like what? No, like when you use gaslight.
Oh, are you asking the definition?
Like why do people use this term?
It's like if I were to come in and try to tell you, like Paul, you would say, oh, I saw a gorilla crossing the street yesterday, and maybe you did. Let's say you did, right? And I would be like, oh, you didn't see that, Paul. You didn't see that. And they'll be like, no, Ads, I saw a gorilla. And I'm like, no, you didn't, Paul. You're overworked. You just finished your semester, and then you're like, oh, you know what? You're right. Then I successfully just gaslit you. And it happens in relationships too, where one partner, for example, will think the other's cheating. And then the cheating partner will be like, you're making stuff up. You're imagining things. And then they'll be like, okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. That's a successful gaslighting. And that's, I think, like with this there's no office of the president elect. Like that doesn't exist. It's complete fabrication by the media. That's more propaganda. But gaslighting, like, oh, there's no election fraud. That's a gaslighting attempt when there's obvious evidence for that. I mean, we've seen the hundreds of videos, testimonials. Like you trying to tell me all these independent citizens are they're in on some cabal? Like, no, I'm not buying that. They're coming forward independent of each other, sometimes corroborating and sometimes bringing forth new information. But the media trying to tell us that there's no
gaslighting is a form
of this is gaslighting.
So gaslighting is a tool of the Smith Modernization Act.
Yeah, and it's like
it's a mechanism.
Yeah, it's a manipulation tool. Yeah. Part of kind of like the dark side of persuasion. I wouldn't.
Now, some people could be not realizing they're gaslighting. There's some people that know that they're gaslighting.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because of their ignorance, they may not realize they're gaslighting. But
yeah, And the Smith,
like for example,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, like for example, I was talking to my mother. Her birthday just happened just the other day, and
happy birthday, Mama Cottrell.
So and we were talking about the election. Now, my parents have been strong Republicans, all right, for a long time. They're definitely not Democrats, and but the thing is my mother, because all she's listening to is mainstream media. She really believes that Biden won and that Trump is being a sore loser because that's what the media is programmed her to think.
It's so strong. It's so powerful, right? The media.
So when I said that, no, Trump really did win. It's just that there was so much fraud and corruption that the courts are captured and that they're not really listening to the evidence.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, there's no evidence. And I go, well, what about the 100 people that have their sworn affidavits that they actually saw the voter fraud
under oath, where you can go to jail for lying?
But you know what my mother said? She goes, well, they're Republicans, so you can't trust them. So it's like,
this is what they want.
And she falls in the line of totally brainwashed from the whole situation.
It's that blue-red dichotomy too, that even a term like rhino, Republican name only, I think still falls into that dichotomous perspective whereby you always have to vote party lines. And that's not to say I don't think there are traitors on the Republican side. There certainly are. I think the cabal is much deeper in the Democratic sphere because of the fact they have been the stronger and bigger party nationally. Therefore, there's more corruption, and the biggest tool really has been appealing to the poor minorities, especially in women, and that's really, I think, where the bulk of their power comes from. is the gaslighting or brainwashing of those groups, but not to mention general Americans who pay attention to the mainstream as well, such as your parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't talk to my dad about it, but it was just my mother. But I was just shocked because I would have assumed that she was thinking like I was, because but she just got brainwashed. I mean, and think about it. These are college educated individuals, but they're in the 70s, so they're from a different generation. The way they get their news is totally different. They get it through paper. The newspaper, literally. They don't, they're not internet savvy. So it's Channel 7, Channel 4, CNN, and, the Detroit News, So whatever's in there is what they're going to believe. This is a big problem. I think that there's a big part of the country that's like us, that's looking at the facts and, calling balls and strikes here and saying, hey, wait a minute here. There was something definitely wrong and it needs to be investigated. And then you have another big section of the society just that thinks that Trump's just being a crybaby.
Yeah.
That's what they literally believe.
Yeah. And it's easier, I think, to believe that Trump is just a one-man band who's a jerk crybaby than it is to comprehend that this cabal has control of every single aspect of the bureaucracy. And we're finding out now that their control over the judicial system is quite extensive as well, which is, and I was talking to Ryan Dawson about this. I was like, that's the question. He agreed with me. He's, what's the judicial system's backbone? What is it? Do they have all the judges in their pockets? It's looking like that. I mean, Major Prather said, I think yesterday, that we are losing right now. And, I said it, I think it's 2 days ago. I said things are not looking great right now. But he still has the executive order, and they don't release the ballots to the public until the 6th, or the electors' ballots until the 6th. But I just wanted to go over this. I don't think you can see it, but I'll just explain a bit of this map that I've been working on with here in Georgia. Governor Kemp is married to Marty Kemp, who's sisters with this woman called Amy Argo Cowsert. So Kemp's wife is sisters with Amy Argo, who is married to Bill Cowsert, Amy Cowsert and Bill Cowsert, who's the Georgia State Senate Majority Leader. So there's a direct connection between Governor Kemp and Bill Cowsert, the Majority Leader of the Georgia Senate, through their wives, who are sisters. Their father, the sisters, Marty and Amy's dad, Bob Argo, was also a Georgia legislator. And another connection too that I want to get into deeper is Kemp's college fraternity advisor, Lewis Massey, who was kind of his Jedi master in many ways. And many of these politicians, they go through, I think he went to UGA, but this particular fraternity at his alma mater. And it connects to a bunch of people involved in Georgia politics that I want to get deeper into as well. But that sister connection with the wives of the Majority Leader and Kemp, I thought was quite telling. The biggest kind of maybe red flag, you could say, but yeah, very much a cabal here in Georgia, according to a local I spoke with.
Well, this is scary because they're the battleground to determine if the Democratic Party is going to control all of
Senate.
Congress. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this is really disturbing what's going on here, that we literally may be seeing not only the fall of Trump, but the fall of the Republican Party in the Senate. Rome. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's happening. And my last recording with George, he was saying, you know what, maybe the states need to break apart. The United States needs to break apart. And that, my point of view is that it shouldn't break apart, but I see his point that the corruption is so bad in New York and in DC
that
it may not be repairable.
These big cities.
Right. So that's why I take the stance. The best way to handle it is to target it. You have to bring down the financial system and target the banks, and
Yeah.
and and then you have
Fractional
to
reserve banking is just such a racket.
Oh, definitely.
It's
Definitely.
insane.
We are slaves because of the Federal Reserve.
Oh yeah.
And then
Which is not federal. It's a private entity, which
right,
I didn't know until maybe this year, but I don't think most people know that, because it's like Federal Reserve. It must be no, it's not the government. It's a private entity of a banking cartel that essentially runs the world.
Right.
And that's the backbone of
So
power, is the finance.
we need to almost burn down NYSE and literally burn down the DC and rebuild it.
And the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, his wife, he's from Madison, by the way, Wisconsin. His wife is Kelly Loeffler, which I didn't even know until I just talked to my friend. He's like, yeah, isn't her husband the stock exchange chairman? I was like, what? Are you serious? And I looked it up.
Kelly
sure
Loeffler?
Enough, she's one of the senators here in Georgia, who's Harrison Deal was her aide, the young lad that died. Yeah. So
see, this is the problem, is that there's too many people that are tied into high finance they have inroads in politics. There's way too much. And there was a reason why New York wasn't allowed to be the capital for the country, because the founding fathers thought that there would be too much corruption. They had to be separated. But unfortunately, with the modern world that we live in, that they're much closer now than ever.
His name is Jeffrey Sprecher.
Yeah, I didn't
CEO of Intercontinental Exchange and chairman of the New York Stock Exchange. From Madison, Wisconsin. He also went to my alma mater. His net worth is $355 million. His wife, Kelly Loeffler, again, senator from Georgia, serving with David Perdue. Her net worth is $165 million. And yeah, and he said that to me. I was like, whoa, I did not know that. So Georgia really is a geopolitical stronghold, hub, which I never knew about until I came here. And it's Hartsfield-Jackson is the busiest airport in the world by passengers. And then in that sense, it's been called the child trafficking capital of the world.
You want to hear something cool? So when I was managing the portfolio for Catholic Charities, so there were many different portfolios. There were many for Catholic Charities, but also portfolios for the Archdiocese. And Phelan, who ran the NYSE during Reagan for the '87 crash, he was the head chair of our finance committee. All right. So I knew Phelan personally and had a report to Phelan. So if you type in Phelan in New York Stock Exchange, you'll see that he's ex Korean War guy. But and I went to his funeral when he died at the main cathedral in New York City.
John Joseph Phelan Jr. Passed August the 4th, 2012.
Yep, I was at the funeral, and then and that Dolan, did the eulogy, but but it's interesting and being connected to that. Now, he already retired from the NYSE when he was part of our finance board, but it was interesting to hear, his perspective, and he being an ex NYSE guy, he was always saying, don't get complicated. Don't go down the road of making a portfolio complicated and doing all this hedging strategy and stuff. Make it simple. A 60-40 strategy, some bonds, some, equities. You don't have to get into, complex hedging strategies, because that's what was happening during the computerization of the NYSE, and that's what created the instability. So it was interesting to see this guy, because he had one foot in the old way, the stock market worked, and he was instrumental in computerizing the NYSE. So he was that of that generation of that transition. Now the ones that are running the NYSE, they don't know anything but computerization, and it's leading to instability. So
why is that, Paul? Because of the nature of computers in the exchange, or?
Well, what is happening is that you have more chance of scalping. You have more. You have the ability. We're starting to really get a snowstorm here in New York.
Yeah, it was raining today in Atlanta.
And so the computerization has now brought about new abilities to sell different types of products. All right. And you can create derivatives and derivatives of derivatives. And so the underlying is eroded, the underlying meaning the actual thing that is of value, let's say of a house. All right. If you're making a derivative off of a house, all right, and then you're doing a derivative of a derivative, it is slowly eroding the actual underlying value of the commodity you're trading.
I've heard about this. Could you briefly define a derivative for us, Paul?
So a derivative is basically, like, for example, you have a mortgage, all right, and the bank owns the mortgage. Well, the bank has a series of people like you, so they have a portfolio of mortgages. They can say, well, I have such a large portfolio of mortgages, I'm going to actually roll all those monthly payments, and I'm going to borrow money, or I'm going to package it into a mortgage-backed security, and I'm going to sell that security on the market. So, and when you do that, you can, you make a profit, right? When you're doing that, and the buyer of the asset is assuming that it'll go up, right? Because why would they buy something if they didn't think it would go up? Because they probably think that the value of the underlying asset will continue to go up. All right. So a derivative is like taking something and wrapping it up into some sort of security and selling it on the market. You're not buying the mortgage. You're not buying the house. You're just buying a piece of paper that says it owns a cash flow from a portfolio of mortgages that are paid for by individuals that have a mortgage. So it's
there's
separating.
No risk for the bank.
Well, I mean,
right?
It reduces risk. I mean, some of these banks are buying the derivatives. So if they're buying the derivative, then they have the risk. They do.
Is this similar to naked short selling? Because I know that's a huge problem on Wall Street. This naked short selling.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. That's part of it. But when you don't have an underlying, when you don't own, that's the thing is that if you short something and you really don't even have ownership of the underlying, then that causes, instability too. But
you're basically selling nothing.
Right. So the point here is that when you create these financial engineering products, it causes a systemic risk eventually. So I'm not a big fan of derivatives, very complex derivatives. I mean, simple stuff like, some stuff could be securitized and that would be okay. All right. And it helps the economy. What's weird is that what is exotic, an exotic derivative becomes a vanilla derivative later. So, so financial engineering actually just kind of like gets sucked into the normalcy of the economy. But these derivatives are becoming so complex and large that you now have a derivatives market that's multiple times larger than the world GDP. So I mean, because you're selling stuff that doesn't have they're not really tied to an underlying asset, the true value of something, because it's a value of a value of a value. So it's magnifying it. So if it crashes, that's why they, the ones that are holding that they can go bankrupt. So Phelan was against that, the over securitization, or the over derivativization of the economy. He was an interesting guy. He was very humble, very, very humble guy. And I'd love to listen to his stories, because he was a war guy, he was, a Korean War guy, but it was always interesting to hear. He was a little short guy, just walking around. But when I knew him, his health was starting to fail. Was having a hard time walking. But he was always an interesting guy. And I'm glad I knew him, because I was working on like doing the pre-work for the dissertation when I was interfacing with him. So I was able to kind of like tap into that knowledge, listen to the elder, and because my dissertation was focused on actually hedging markets using derivatives, so dynamically hedging a portfolio, while Phelan wasn't really, he didn't like dynamically hedging a portfolio. You can hedge, doing bonds and equities, but not active, not like dynamically doing it every day or every fourth day. He was more old school, where you would adjust the portfolio once a year or twice a year, something like that.
A little longer term approach.
Yeah. But in today's world, many traders are, they're adjusting their positions dynamically because of the
Bitcoin's going to play into this, because I just want to tie this into, I was speaking to a source here too. I think he gets his haircut from a Vietnamese or Cambodian dude who came here, and he had experience with, communism in his country. I can't remember if it was Vietnam or Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge, but he's saying he had seen this before of, the statue toppling, and, before the complete overthrow is crashing the money system and instilling the new currency of communist government.
Well, yeah.
But how do you think Bitcoin may play into the whole money system?
Well,
because it's very decentralized, and
right.
It takes the trust. There's no need for trust because of that double encryption aspect to it. And
there's benefits of a blockchain technology, and blockchain technology could be used for non-monetary things. You can use blockchain for security. You can use blockchain to actually track accounting principles. Like, for example, there's something called, I'm going to go on a tangent here, but there's something called money's fungible. So if you have $50,000 and you spend 25, you don't have to technically track the $25 because it's fungible. It's just anything within the 50,000 pool can pay for that $25 expense. But there are sometimes it's better, especially for nonprofits, to be able to track a donor dollar and know exactly how that donor dollar was spent. So in some cases, money is not fungible. So blockchain technology could be used to track a particular donation. In this case, nonprofit, a donation dollar. So someone donates $100,000. There's 100,000 new blockchain codes that are created within the accounting software. And then now, as the money is being spent, they could do a report off the blockchain that's tied to that donor to give to a report to their foundation that states, this is how your money was spent. Some of it went for food. Some of it went for clothing for the client. Some of them went for administration. Some of it, and they could track it by the dollar. But when you have money is fungible, you don't have that. So blockchain technology isn't just for security. It's also for tracking the base unit as it's going through the whole organization. So there's benefits to it. Now, how does that pertain to Bitcoin? Bitcoin, I have stated from day one, I have never invested in Bitcoin. And I never will invest in Bitcoin. And the reason being is that there's two reasons. One is that it was a beta test for a decashing of a society. I believe that we should have coinage, and that's the only way to vote your way out of a bank. But if you are in a digital currency only, a decashed society, you can never take your money out of the banking system. That's a big problem. That's a big problem.
Okay. So you're for currency backed by gold, silver, as opposed to a fiat or a crypto or currency?
Well,
because we're entirely fiat right now.
Yeah. But there's benefits of fiat. All right. I've written about this in some of my books. But, it's not a simple answer. All right. On these things that you're talking about. If you have a currency that's backed by something like gold, then if you have a growing economy, but the gold supply is not growing, it's actually deflationary, and it'll retard the process of the growing economy. This is the reason why you need to have the monetary base connected to the growth of GDP. If the growth of GDP is going at 2%, the monetary base should not grow any more than 2%. Same thing. If the GDP is growing less, then to maintain the proper value of money, then the monetary base needs to shrink by 2%. If the economy went down by 2%. Now, the problem comes in is that when you start following policies of Keynes, and Keynes wasn't really Keynesian. Keynesians took Keynes's thoughts and put it on steroids. Keynes said you only intervene when you absolutely positively have to, when the economy is absolutely tanking, not,
whenever you feel
they're rear of it. Right. Exactly. So, but what happened in the UK was that there was a big movement on social engineering, being able to socially engineer the economy. Okay. So these Keynesians thought through monetary policy, they would be able to make things good, just print more money because we're issuing more debt. Well, that's not what Keynes said. Hayek was coming from the Austria school of thought, where it's like, you don't intervene at all. Because once you start intervening, then that drug addict, addict will keep on asking for more and more money.
Yeah. And that's right? What we're doing now.
And so this is there was a middle ground, there's kind of a middle ground between Hayek and Keynes, not Keynesians. Keynesians are crazy, but Keynes was saying you have to intervene or the economy will collapse.
What isn't our system largely influenced by Friedman though, as well?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the two big ones is Keynes and Hayek. So, and then you got tributaries that are coming off of these individuals. Like, I would say that Stiglitz would be a Keynesian. Friedman would be coming off of the side of Hayek. So the trunks of the two trees are Hayek and Keynes. So, because Friedman's, free market capitalist, right? Well,
I remember taking AP macro in college for independent study and learning about Keynesian economics, and I was just so lost. I should have taken micro instead of macro. Way more
See,
fundamental,
well,
way
the
more
thing is,
concrete.
well, honestly, I like the macro more than the micro.
Doesn't it seem a bit like it just seems like nobody really can know for sure what's going on at the macro level, or break it down to a science. Whereas the micro, it's much more scientific and fundamental. Wouldn't you say?
Well, I think you see the chaos. You start seeing chaos in a system for finance at the macro level. When you're looking at individual transactions, like they say at the business level or the accounting level, the microeconomical level, supply and demand type stuff, then you start seeing that there's order, and it's more predictable. It's a more predictable social science. When you're looking at a macroeconomics, it's more behavioral. And then there's the element of chaos. And I think that's part of the reason why I like the macro more than the micro. Even with trading, I didn't really like trading micro. I like trading macro, meaning, looking at major moves, commodity moves or currency moves, not individual stock moves. But to Bitcoin, answer your question on Bitcoin, it just reached over 20,000. It was either today or yesterday. And so can people make money in Bitcoin? Yes. But I take the perspective that why do I want to participate in a system that is going to erode my civil liberties? Getting into a Bitcoin type currency is beta testing for a decaching of a society. No doubt about that. There's zero doubt in my mind about that Bitcoin was put in place to beta test decaching. And they needed people, one, to socially adapt to it, but also for the technologies to be designed for the point of sale, the POS. So,
but with Bitcoin, it's decentralized, and on top of that, there's there's only a finite amount of it, right? You can't print more Bitcoin like the Fed can.
So let's go back to my original premise. If an economy is growing, which is the only way to deal with debt, is to have a growing economy to be able to pay for it because there's interest. And you have a fixed base, then you literally have you eventually have it's like a sinusoidal. All right. You have a growing economy. All right. As the money base is somewhat flexible or somewhat movable. All right. That the amount of money out there relative to the size of the economy is there's enough play. But when you have a static monetary base, an M1 monetary base, and your economy wants to grow, it can't because it doesn't have enough friction. It has too much friction and not enough oil in the system to allow for the machinery of the economy to move. So if the money, like for example, if you have only $100, but you have a $1 trillion economy, how does the economy survive? It only has $100. So all those transactions that are taking place in the society, someone buying pizza, someone buying, Doritos or whatever, when you take all of those transactions in the society, if you don't have enough money to have those transactions, the transactions will slow down. So the monetary base of Bitcoin, because it's not fractionable, what will happen is it'll actually be sinusoidal and the economy will plateau. It'll plateau and not grow.
What do you mean by not fractionable?
Meaning that taking a Bitcoin and turning it into 2 Bitcoins.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But you can, and I guess the question here is, where do you truncate or end the decimal point? Because you can just take a Bitcoin, cut it in half, cut that one in half, cut that one in half, right? Until
But
you
how's
get,
that any different than what the Federal Reserve just did?
they're not printing more
No,
Bitcoin.
no, that is printing. That is
No, they're
printing.
just dividing it, because
Well,
the
that's the
the
same thing. It's the same
value of
thing.
one Bitcoin is always changing, right?
You know,
So depending on what
yeah.
fraction of that Bitcoin is worth, maybe a smaller fraction will be worth more later on.
But if you have
as the
X
economy
amount of
grows,
gold,
right?
if you have X amount of gold,
Mhm.
all right, and
It
you have
puts
a
a
growing
cap.
economy, if you have X amount of gold, all right, and you're not fractioning the gold bar, let's say all the gold is in one bar. We'll call it the world gold bar. All right. And you can't get any more gold. All right. And everything's tied to that gold bar. All right. Eventually, now if you have a non-fractionable currency, your society will not be able to do any transactions because there's only one gold bar. Nothing's tied to it. Now, what people will do is to say, well, we'll create a piece of paper that's tied to a piece of that gold. All right. But as the economy is growing, each piece of paper is owning less and less of the gold dust of the world gold bar, to a point where the paper will own nothing of the gold, because there's going to be so much paper printed. So it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. It's the same principle. If it's one gold bar, or I'm making up the number, I don't know what it is, but 50 trillion Bitcoins. Once they reach to the point where you can't make any more Bitcoin, the society, if the society was running on Bitcoin, could not grow. The transactions would, the increase in transactions would no longer happen. It would be flat, because the economy can't get more, because there's no currency to fluctuate.
Can't you
Now,
just
what?
keep dividing the number, though? Can't you just keep dividing until it gets smaller and smaller?
Well, that's what the Federal Reserve does right now with when it was on the gold standard and the fiat standard, is what it is.
But they're
It's
printing
just,
more than the economy's growing, right?
no. But when you say print, when you print, let's
They're
go back
printing
to
more
the day.
cash than we're growing.
Yeah, but let's go back to the days of a gold-based Federal Reserve. All right, they had X amount of gold, and what was happening is that they said that we will fix the currency to the gold, for a certain ounce of gold. They would do that, but because it was fixed and not fluctuating, what would happen is that the society would grow to a certain level, and then they would have to readjust for the fixed rate. All right. And by readjusting, they are redividing the gold bar, because the society reached to a certain point where the original fixed rate wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you have a gold bar, all right, and you have 100 people, and there's $100, so you have $1 for each person, then that each person owns 1/100th of that bar. But now extrapolate out to 330 million people, and that gold bar hasn't changed.
Okay, but
you have
you
to have the
can
economy.
divide Bitcoin, though. You can't divide $1 in half, but you can get 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, etc., until to infinity, right? Hypothetically, until you get to the point where, depending on the value of the Bitcoin.
But let's say this. Let's say you are an investor before this fractionalization that you're talking about of Bitcoin. All right. And you have 10,000 Bitcoins. All right. Now, and it will buy $10,000 worth of goods. when you fractionalize this, now not only do you have 10,000, let's say they did a half split. All right. So now you have 20,000 Bitcoins. All right. But it only buys $10,000, 10,000 Bitcoins worth of goods. So in other words, what you just did without anything, unless the economy is growing, but assuming the economy is not growing, all you did was you raised the cost of goods. That it takes more Bitcoin to buy the same good.
Okay. That's okay. I understand that a little
Because
more.
I hold 20, let's say I'm holding 20,000 Bitcoins. All right. And you decide let's say someone decides to fractionalize it. Now I have 40,000 Bitcoins, but it takes me 40,000 to buy the same amount. So the value of each of my Bitcoin has gone down.
Okay. That's probably the extent of my Bitcoin knowledge, but I definitely want to read and research more because I'd love to get into this more, Paul.
Can money be made? Can money be
financial
made in Bitcoin?
background.
Yes. In the short term, yes, it can be made. Definitely. I won't touch it because of one, it's beta testing, decaching. And not only that, the Federal Reserve, even if you were holding Bitcoin, the Federal Reserve at any given day could say Bitcoin's illegal and you've lost all your money. And you're better off just waiting out and just saying, hey, if decaching is going to happen, it's going to be the Federal Reserve that's going to be controlling the decaching entity, whatever that is, the digital dollar or whatever, the Fed dollar or whatever it is. It's not. You think that Federal Reserve is going to say we're going to allow for Bitcoin to be the currency of the Federal Reserve? No way.
Definitely not.
That is never going to happen.
Right.
Now, what could happen, and it probably will happen, is that the Federal Reserve will say, we'll allow these other currencies to exist, but you're going to have to transfer over to the federal version. All right. So if you're paying your taxes, you would have to transfer it over to there. So it becomes really kind of like a non-nation state currency trade, very similar to buying yen or buying rubles or buying whatever. You're buying Bitcoin, but the reality is that you eventually have to transfer over to another currency to pay for a house or pay for your taxes. Because there's no way the Federal Reserve is going to say you can do transactions in the country, because when you do that, you're giving up. If they did that, they're giving up their power. There's no way the Federal Reserve is going to give up their power. Not unless it's by force.
Yeah, and our problem now is we have too much oil, as you put it, or too much currency, I think, in circulation relative to our GDP, which is why the inflation has been so constant over the last century. But to them, it's just a game. They just, it's as far as I understand it, there's no way we can pay back this debt. Even if we did.
That's right.
Even if we were straight shooting up, because of fractional banking. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I don't have the solution, but I do love discussing this with you, Paul. And I'm definitely once I have more time, I think in the new year, I'm going to do some more Bitcoin research, and hopefully we can hash out the financial sector.
It's definitely better. There's definitely movement in that current. It's an asset class, right? But I don't think it's going to be the answer for the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve will use a technology that's similar, like Bitcoin / blockchain technology for decaching society, for sure. But will Bitcoin really have any real value? Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. See, everyone's thinking that currencies will be decentralized, and that you'll be able to buy everything on whatever digital currency that is. But that's assuming that you're going to have a one world government. You're going to have a government that doesn't have nations. nations control their currency. There's two things that make a nation: currency and borders. And the only way that these countries would say yes to a decentralized currency is if they were starting to erode their borders and erode their control of their currency. They're not going to do that.
Sure. Yeah. I still think it's important, I think, to have that some sort of decentralized currency, even if it isn't the main one. But I do think, nationalized currencies are.
When someone says to have a decentralized currency, what are they saying? What is the impetus of that? Why
there's
is
no
someone
banking cartel in charge of our money? Like, there's no banking cartel that owns Bitcoin, right? So, in that sense,
first of all, you don't know.
You
don't know if it wasn't the banking cartel that actually instituted the beta test.
Yeah, which I guess no one really knows who made Bitcoin.
That's my standpoint on this, is that it was beta test through the central bank.
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah, that's who people say it was. Yeah, but it doesn't. Yeah, that it wasn't some brainiac that hates the Federal Reserve that made this. I don't believe it for a second.
Yeah, I don't think one person
because
made
the thing is that the IMF has been working on decashing societies for over a decade. So this has been in the works for a while. They just didn't have a mechanism. They didn't have anything out there that was beta testing it to build up systems to be able to just plug and play. Once the Federal Reserve decided to, the Federal Reserve didn't have the power, the power or the wherewithal, the technological wherewithal to build up the POSs to be able to institute decaching. Bitcoin and blockchain they have built up the POS system. Now the Federal Reserve can just borrow that backbone of technology and just plug and play right into it. Bitcoin isn't going to be, Federal Reserve is not going to be running on Bitcoin. Not at all. Not at all.
They're too afraid of it.
But the thing is that it may be transferred to it. But when someone says, I'm going to be decaching, or that they're going to be decentralizing their cash into a Bitcoin, then that to me is saying that you're really a transnational capitalist and you're not really a part of a nation. That person that's buying these things didn't, like, I know I'm American because
I see your point.
I know I'm American because of my birth certificate, where I live, what currency I hold, where I pay my taxes, right? But when someone is decentralized, who are they?
Yeah. Let's pivot, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah. But because I definitely am somewhat out of my element there, just because I'm not a Bitcoin expert by any means, but just the decentralization is something that I'm a fan of, with the, Federal Reserve, the government, I think is far too centralized, far too in control. I mean, that's what communist China is a centralized communist party in charge of the larger nation state that is China.
But think about what's happening in China is that they have the social scoring and the social controlling. But what
that's
is blockchain?
Completely centralized. That's AI. That's AI.
That's true. But here's the problem: is that blockchain technology is a digital ledger. It's tracking you by the second on how you're spending your money. They don't have that on the greenback. They don't know how you're spending your money when you're using greenbacks. But when you use any type of digital dollar, Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, there is a ledger on how you spent your money. And when you plug that into a social scoring system or a society that curtails your freedoms if you don't toe a certain line, that's why I said that decaching is an important element of the Biopatriot Act. And that why these digital currencies being beta tested are really bad for you, for your civil liberties, because they can turn off your ability to spend. And not only that, they know how you spend your money. by the second.
Yeah, so I agree. I don't think that cashless is the way to go. I still think cash is largely king in many ways, but the difference between like Apple Pay or which is cashless, right? And Bitcoin is the fact that there's not a name attached to it. There's only a wallet ID attached to it. And they can look at other, as far as I know, purchases that or transactions that wallet made, and using that investigative work, there's a degree of chance for identifying who that person is. But a cashless like Apple Pay or something, it goes to your name right away. So in that sense, it's not as controlled, and it's much more decentralized. But I do see your point insofar as relying on it wholeheartedly. I don't think the risk is too great. I think it's too volatile.
What's happening though with Apple Pay is they're adding intermediaries. So when you have a digital system, you're dependent on a device like this to be able to spend your money, right?
Yeah.
Instead, the olden days, you pull out your wallet and you pull out a dollar bill and you buy a bag of potato chips, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's no intermediary scalping a few cents.
Yeah,
a few cents on each transaction. Now, with the digital system, you have to constantly upgrade. That's one cost to you. And then the friction that it's created because there's a middleman.
Yeah, that's what Dave Underdown mentions that too, just in general. He's like, you don't want to control the road. You just want to control the toll booth and get 2 cents every time someone comes through. Like likewise with the Pacer system that I mentioned, or the JSTOR's scientific articles as well. All you need is a few cents every transaction, and that
right.
That
but when you have to buy food, so you work, you have to buy food to eat, you have to have shelter. But every time you make that payment, Apple is going to get a few cents of that. That is taxation without equal representation.
Yeah, 100%.
Because no one has stated, "Hey, Apple, I'm willing to give you my 2%." or my 2 cents for every transaction.
Even like PayPal, and I'm thankful for PayPal and Patreon, but there is that middleman aspect.
Yeah, the friction is too high on
it's
Patreon.
Insane. Yeah, it's
the same problem with Stripe. This is why they want decaching, and this is why Zuckerberg is pushing Libra.
Yeah,
because he's got a billion
digital
people.
Currency too, right?
Yeah,
Facebook.
They have a billion people or over a billion people on their platforms.
That's insane.
Okay, so if they just get a little bit of a intermediary transaction, that's big money for each transaction.
Trillions.
Because he set up a community. He's like Amway, in a way. You set up a community that's going to buy certain products. You have to build up the community. So how do you build up the community? Give them something free, a page, put some stuff on there. Okay, now you know the social behavior of the community. Now you can advertise in that social hive. All right. Now all you have to do is now have a mechanism to be able to get a little bit of each of the transactions when they're buying. So what's going to happen is Facebook is going to end up being kind of like a money changer, getting a little bit of a transaction from buyer to seller within their little hive.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And that will make that if they can do that, if they can get that, Zuckerberg will be 10 times richer than Jeff Bezos.
Yeah. 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 Those super socios are definitely competing for world domination. Yeah.
And then what happens is that once they have all that money, they have all that power. They're just eroding. What did I just describe? I just described on how a billionaire is going to make more billions or trillions of dollars, literally trillions of dollars, by being this Facebook / banker. And then what happens is it erodes our value of our money, because every time we do something, we have less money because there's more friction.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's but yeah, going back to the election, I think secession is on the table. I think, obviously there's still a potential for a lot of civil conflict, uh, trial by sword, shall we say, which none of us want as well. But it's, there's a chance too that Trump sold out, which I think should be brought to discussion as well. And what I mean by that is, what if the deep state came forth to him with a package deal of, look, step down, and your family will be made a dynasty. You will be one of the Bushes. You'll be one of the Clintons. You'll be the new dynasty. But you just
Maybe.
have to give us this election, and you have to give us the next one. And then after that, Don Jr., Eric, Ivana, they can all get in, which I think is a really scary thought for people to grapple with the possibility of, because of how much trust and belief that a lot of people have in Donald Trump as the chosen one, as the savior, as the whatever you want to call him. I don't think he is that. I think he is a monkey wrench. He is the monkey wrench that we haven't seen since John F. Kennedy. But I think he still might have a price, such that, is that what he's holding out for? Is that package dynasty deal that the deep state, I think, will probably offer him if they haven't already?
Well, I think you have something there. I mean, there's something there. I mean, you could see it in the media with Kushner and Ivanka. I don't know if it's Don Jr. I think it's going to be Kushner and Ivanka.
Yeah, I think
they're kind of spinning
that
it.
Israel connection there.
Yep.
That would get approval from Mossad. That would get approval from CIA. It would make the most sense. I think you're right there. Yeah.
No.
And not to mention the pretty, got the woman thing going, and she's very smart and beautiful and all that,
right.
and so very marketable. Very marketable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think Don Jr. is less marketable, but I'm against dynasties. I mean, I don't want to see families, I don't want to see another Bush family in. Yeah. I don't want to see another Clinton family in. I just want, I have a hard time believing that out of 330 million people, that the only
there's
way
3 families
is there's 3 families into the presidency. Yeah, right. So that's why, I'm running for president.
Yeah, you got my vote, Paul. Seriously.
So,
and you know what I didn't mention too is when I went to vote for representatives in, was it August? The voter person, she's like, yeah, you have to pick the whole party. You have to vote. If you're gonna go vote Dem, you have to vote all Dem. If you're gonna vote Republican, yeah, they told me that. And
that's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy, but.
I mean, what I did was I voted all Republican in New York, except there were certain line items that only had Democrats on them. So like judges, there were no Republican judges to vote for. So what I did was I said, I'm not going to have a female Democrat judge, because my thinking was there would be 2 ultra liberal versus a male Democrat judge.
Yeah.
So that was my thinking. But even though
that's true.
but it is on some items, when you're voting, you may not have a Republican and a Democrat. Yeah, especially in a very blue state like New York.
Mm-hmm. It's election integrity. It's really the backbone of this great country we live in that is just going up in flames as we speak.
That's right.
But so January, Paul, we should meet up if that would be possible, and do some intelligence work there, some interviews. I'd love to
It'd be cool.
know more about your background. And Shrimpsy was talking about renting a van and making the trip to the financial mecca of the United States, your current hometown, New York City. There's one author I want to talk to there, Nick Bryant, who I did an interview with, first guy with Epstein's Black Book, if anybody wants to see my chat with him. A couple other YouTubers too, as well, that are in New York City that I think Shrimp and I would like to collaborate with. But I'd love to sit down, have a meal, maybe do a couple in-person interviews too. I think that'd be great, especially before inauguration. I think it's just
there's no right
electric.
now dining is shut down in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you knew that or not.
I think it was in Minnesota. They shut
it down this Monday.
did they?
Outdoors.
Yeah,
The
now that
indoor
it's like,
dining is shut down.
yeah, now that it's
Outdoor, you
20
can do.
degrees outside. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, and with snow too. But
Yeah.
but can we pick up on this maybe tomorrow, because
Yeah.
I got to get
Sure.
some dinner
Yeah,
here.
let's call it. Yeah,
But
definitely.
let's let me stop the recording here,
Okay.
and then
Stay
I'll put
frosty.
this up on the channel. Hold on.